Let's now walk through some example tasks using Python and the various libraries for web scraping. Let's go to Jupyter Notebook. To begin, we're going to start with a very simple website. We will be scraping www.example.com. It's just an example domain for illustrative purposes. So the first thing we need to do is import the requests library. The requests library allows us to send a request and grab information from a website. We will say res is equal to, then we will type out requests, we will say .get, and then we need to provide the URL of the website. So in this case, we're going to say http://www.example.com. And it's important that you add in either HTTP or HTTPS. Otherwise, if you just say example.com, most likely you're going to get some sort of failure. Now keep in mind, if you have a firewall, you're going to need to disable it, otherwise Python may get blocked from scraping the website. So if you run this and you've already installed requests, then you should see this run with no problem. And if we check out the result of this, we have a response result. And off of this response, we can grab the text attribute, and this is essentially the actual HTML that's on the website. And we're going to be using the beautiful soup to analyze this extracted page. So keep that difference in mind. We use the requests library to actually get the content of a website, and then we use the beautiful soup to analyze that content. And if we check out example.com, and if we were to right click and view page source, we can see that we have the actual HTML file from example.com. This is essentially the information that's returned when you type in a request. You can see that same information here, except it's not nicely formatted, but it's the same information. So what we're going to do next is import BS4 for Beautiful Soup. And the idea behind Beautiful Soup is that we create a soup object that contains all the quote-unquote ingredients of a web page. So what we will do is say soup is equal to BS4, and we will call the Beautiful Soup method. And then we will pass in this text we have right here. So we're going to say res.text. And then we need to pass in LXML as a code that allows us to actually format this and then read it. And we need to make sure you've installed LXML library as well. So make sure you've done pip install or const install for both BS4, the requests library, and LXML library. Once you run this, the beautiful soup is going to create a soup object out of this. That means you can easily read things off of it or select elements off of it. So we have this soup object. So if we check out what soup is, it's this beautiful soup object, and we can call the select method off of this, and then we can pass in tags. So if we take a look back at the HTML here, so if I zoom in a lot, I can see that there's a title here for the web page, and it says example domain, and that's going to be the same title that's up here in the tab of the example domain. So when I come here, I can select the title tag. Now what is actually returned back is a list of a tag object. So let's explain that a little more. We're going to say that my title tag list is equal to soup.select title. I run this, and if I check out my title tag list and run that, I see I have this, and that's going to be a list of everything that had a title tag inside of this example domain's HTML. Now what we can do is index off of this, and then I can see I have this tag object. So this is actually not a string yet. It's still, if we take a look at type, it's this special Beautiful Soup 4 element tag object. And what we want is the actual text of that. So if I take a look at just what that was, it's this title, and I just want the actual text. So what I'm going to do is say dot, and there's a get text method that you can call off of this to get the example domain. And that is a full example of web scraping. It's a very simple example, but it technically goes through all the steps. Let's quickly review so we have an idea of what we need to do. You first need to import the requests library, then send your request to whatever URL you're interested in. Check the text, and that should be the HTML document itself. And then you're going to import Beautiful Soup. You're going to create a soup out of that text. Then you're going to use LXML as a string code for reading this text in and creating the soup from it. Then you can select different tags from the actual soup object, and that will return back a list of all the objects that have that tag, and then you can extract information from that. Now let's move on to another example where we attempt to grab all the elements of a particular class on a website. For this example, we're going to be using a Wikipedia page, and the Wikipedia page we'll be using is the Wikipedia page for room 641A, and you have this link in the guide to web scraping notebook, so you can go ahead and check that out or do a simple Google search for this Wikipedia page. What we will attempt to do is grab all the section headings of this Wikipedia article. And what we mean by section headings are the words here: description, lawsuit, gallery, and then see also. So the actual titles of these headings, or whatever these words are, the text in these headings, is what we want to grab. So how do we actually do this? Well, we first need to actually request the website. So let's do that. And then we'll come back in a second and explain what this syntax means. But we will say res is equal to request.get, and we will pass in that URL, and it will grab that website information for us. Then we will say soup is equal to bs4 beautiful soup, and then we'll pass in the text and say lxml in order to read that in. And now we have a soup object. So then I can say soup select. However, now I have a problem. Previously, I wanted to select the title. Now I need to figure out what I actually want to select. And in this case, we're going to need to inspect this website, or inspect the source code for this website. So what you need to do is, whenever you're web scraping a website and you're looking for a particular class or what you actually want to pass into the select statement, what you do is you right click on whatever you're interested in and then say inspect, not view page source, but inspect. And then if you're using the Chrome browser, you should be able to see a doc.html type come up on part of your screen, either on the bottom or to the side, and you will see highlighted what you just inspected. And hopefully what you inspected either has an ID or a class. And if we look at this closely, we can see that under an H2 tag, there is a class MW-headline and an ID description. There's no right answer as far as what we need to select. A lot of times it's going to take experimentation to see if it makes sense to grab IDs, makes sense to grab headers or tags, or it makes sense to grab a class. So one approach would be to try to grab everything that is an H2 heading on this page, and that might be all the titles. However, we might get some other stuff. Really, you're going to have to experiment when working with other websites. In our case, we're going to attempt to use this class MW-headline because that seems to be like a good indicator of the actual headers for the content, description, lawsuit, etc. So what we will do is we are going to grab this MW-headline and use that as our selection. So we will come back here and we will say MW-headline. Except keep in mind, MW-headline, it's actually a class, so there's a bit of a syntax we need to use for certain CSS calls. And these are the following. You can find this table as well in your notebook, but these are the following syntax calls for the different things you're going to select. If you just say .select with a single string, that's going to assume that that string stands for some sort of HTML element, such as all the paragraphs, everything with a div tag, everything with title. Just like we did up here, we grabbed everything with the title. In this case, we're actually going to be using a CSS class. If you start with a hashtag, that's going to be trying to grab anything with that ID. And then if you start with a period or a dot, that's going to grab everything with the class, in this case named notice. So we're using a class, which means we need to start our select statement with .mw-headline. And if you were to open up a CSS file, it follows the same convention. So IDs start with a hashtag, classes start with a dot. And if you want to get a little more complex with your select methods, you can also have two tags spaced out. And this selects all elements named span that are within a div element. And if you use this greater than symbol, that's going to select any elements named span that are directly within an element named div with no other elements in between. So these are a little more complex, and sometimes they require you to study up a little more on HTML and CSS. But in our case, we're mostly going to be using these first three. Either grab all the elements with some sort of tag, grab all the ID elements, or grab all the class elements. Now when I run this select statement for the class, it looks like I get a list of all the headers that I wanted: description, lawsuit, gallery, see also, references, and external links. So it looks like we made the right choice. If we had done another choice like soup.select everything with an H2 and ran that, I probably would have gotten some stuff that I didn't want. And you can see here, it looks like we're getting more information than we really wanted, and it looks like it has some other sections in there, like navigation menu, but it might have been a pretty close call. So as I previously mentioned, it's going to take some guessing and checking to see what's the right thing you want to select. In our case, it looks like it's going to be .mw-headline. Now remember, I actually just want the text of this, not the full tag objects. So instead of that, I'm going to iterate through this. We're going to say for item in this list of tags, print out that item's text. And then when we run that, I get back what I wanted: description, lawsuit, gallery, see also, references, and external links. So let's review what we did here. What we did was we sent a request to the URL. We created a soup out of that by passing in the text of that and created a soup. And then we said soup.select, and we had to do was use the inspect tool in our browser to actually figure out what we're looking for. And that's really the hardest part of any web scraping. It's not actually getting the stuff or creating the soup. It's trying to figure out what exactly am I trying to select. And we're looking at pretty basic examples, so it's more or less obvious, especially if you have a little experience web scraping. But a lot of times there's going to be classes within classes, an ID for a lot of elements, and there are going to be tags associated with that. So you're going to have to do some guessing and checking to see what you are actually trying to grab or select in order to grab what you want. But in our case, we figured it out that we wanted to grab a class, and because it was a class, we needed to start with a period or a dot there, and then the class name. So as a review, if it's just an HTML tag, you pass in the string. If it's a particular ID, so if you were to come over here and you saw ID description, and you wanted to grab that ID, then you would say hashtag and then the ID name. Keep in mind, IDs only occur or should only occur once per an HTML document. So it's a good indication that you're just grabbing one thing. And if you're trying to grab a class of objects, you would say dot and then whatever name of the class is. And then you have some more complex methods in case you want elements within elements. All right, we still have a few more examples to go, and we'll be going over them in the next lesson. We'll see you there, agent.